In the heart of the Black Country nestles a small hamlet that has remained virtually untouched by the pressures of modern development. Mushroom Green can still be recognised from over 180 years ago, when it was developed into a working community of nail makers who, due to the introduction of machinery in that trade, gradually turned their skills to chain making, and that is where this story begins. Here is Ron Moss to tell us more.
Mushroom Green, which is called Mushroom on the first edition OS map 1832, is the best remaining example of an unplanned squatters' industrial hamlet in the Black Country. Workers came here and built their own houses as cheaply as possible in higgledy-piggledy fashion on common land. The land was allotted to the Earl of Dudley under the Enclosures Act, and the squatters then found that they had to pay him a few shillings annually as squatters' rent. Mushroom Green was described in 1975 as the only outstanding conservation area in the West Midlands County. The centrepiece of the hamlet is the Kendrick's Preserved Chain Shop, which was said to be an important part of the history of the area. And this was saved, rebuilt and opened to the public in February 1977. Morning, Jim.
Morning, Ron.
Beautiful, isn't it? Beautiful.
Ron Moss is a member and past president of the Black Country Society, who run the Mushroom Green Chain Shop as an outpost of the Black Country Museum. Ron has been supervisor of the chain shop since it opened to the public in 1977 and has a team of 4 working with him at present. One of the first jobs he has to do when opening the chain shop for the day's visitors is to start the kitchen fire. Children who visit are fascinated to see how fires were lit in the days prior to the gas and electric fires that are in use today. Here they learn that lighting a fire used to involve screwing up newspaper to start the fire easily, chopping up wood and putting it on top of the paper with small pieces of coal, then cleaning out the ash pit ready for the next lot of ash. Photographs of the founder and owner of the building, William Kendrick, and his son Harry, adorn the kitchen wall. William was born in 1841 at Derby End, Netherton, and was married to Ellen, a dressmaker, who was born in Cradley. On the death of William in 1915, the chain shop was taken over by his son Harry, who was married to Emily. The deeds were bought from the Earl of Dudley in 1927 for the dwelling house, number 14 Mushroom Green, chain shop and outbuildings. Harry Kendrick died in 1965, aged 80, but his wife Emily stayed in the house until she died in 1972, aged 86. Later in the day, Ron returns to light the fire, and when the paper and wood are alight and blazing, more coal is added. The shape of the chimney ensures that the smoke is drawn up and away.
This chain shop then was saved from demolition in 1972 and rebuilt and opened to the public in 1977. It's rebuilt on its own site, on its original site, and you can see it's a typical chain shop of the area with shutters on the windows, tie bars that run around the building to protect it from mining subsidence. The chimneys are again unique to chain shops in that they're built brick on edge. This we found is really a safety design, because in the old days when they used lime mortar, the fire used to burn the lime away, and it has been known for the chimneys to collapse, go through the roof and cause damage and possibly injure people. And so we found out from people in the hamlet itself that the idea was to build like a log cabin with the bricks overlapping on the corners, so that even if the lime mortar did burn away, the chimneys would still stand up straight. And we find with the more general use and the cement becoming cheaper in the 1890s, we find that they were building then ordinary chimneys with brick laid flat on the sides as we normally see them today. The little building at the side, the little one up and one down, Could have been a little residence for people to live in and sleep in, but when we knew it, it was a kitchen or a brewhouse for the house next door for the Kendricks, while the upper story was an office for Mrs. Kendrick to do her paperwork in, her invoices and that for the firm, for the people who worked in the shop. And then the toilet was added on the back later on. Close to Mushroom Green Chain Shop are examples of old and new domestic housing. Behind me is Rose Cottage, which has been tentatively dated as about 1690 and contains wattle and daub in its upper stories, which were found during renovations in 1950. And to my right are examples of conservation housing built in 1976. The chain shop itself was probably one of those included on a government survey carried out in 1911, which identified in England and Wales 939 domestic or small chain shops, of which 911 are located within 3 miles of this particular chain shop.
Ron, these people would like to know something about the history of the chain shop.
Right.
And I said you were the ideal man to tell them.
Thank you, Vi. Yeah, thanks a lot. Right, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Right.
When visitors arrive at the chain shop, they are greeted by Ron, who is more than willing to explain details of the workshop, which was threatened with demolition in 1972. When the council notified the Black Country Society of this, it was decided that the chain shop was well worth saving on its present site and in an area famous for chain making. With the help of the Department of Environment and the sale of 3 surrounding plots of land, enough money was raised to completely rebuild the chain shop using as much of the original material as possible. Finally, in 1977, it was ready to open to the public and has opened each year since then on the first Sunday of the month from April to October, 2:30 to 5:30 p.m.
The tie bars, of course, I say against mining subsidence. Pulley wheel for loading chain onto the wagon. They could back a wagon or put a rope over. You could pull the chain over, and it would more or less load itself into a barrel. You know, save sort of pulling up from the ground. Be careful when you go in, you know, with the sparks and the uneven floor. But I think you'll enjoy watching Mick at work this afternoon making chain by hand. Okay, right, thanks, Dad. Hello everybody, all right, how's things going? This is the brew house or the kitchen that attached to number 14, the Kendricks house, which we now use as our headquarters for the volunteer staff. And with me this afternoon I got my 2 faithful helpers, Pete Glues, who Black Country Society IA group, who helps me, and Vi Wetton, who is the Black Country Society's first lady president, and she is the president this year. And Vi is quite an expert on the domestic side of the Black Country fittings and things, you see. So I think Vi would possibly be able to tell us something about the various objects in the kitchen itself. Before I do go, I just got to nip into Mick into the chain shop to see how he's progressing. Just back of the only other building now besides the chain shop, there's this brew house, and just the other side of the wall is a traditional Black Country toilet with a high level cistern and a pull chain, and the correct cut up squares of paper on a piece of string, which I think a lot of people would sort of recognise. But anyway, I think Vi will tell us something about the various objects today, the fittings and the grate and the podge rugs and things. So over to you, Vi, okay?
Thank you.
Right. I'll just nip to see how Mick's going on.
Okay, right. The grate was really the mainstay of the cooking, the heating and the cooking. The fire was lit first thing in the morning, and heat just came through from the side. And of course, you've got to remember that these fires were going all the time. It isn't that they were just lit first thing in the morning, so that it took hours for the oven to be heated up. They were heated up all day, all night sometimes, and then throughout the next day, so that the oven was always hot. And then inside, the housewife would do the cooking, the meat at the bottom, or probably at the top first and move down to the bottom. Then the rest of the Yorkshire pudding and the rice pudding was put in. The vegetables would be put on top in one of the saucepans. The saucepans, this is just a small one. The majority of them are quite big and quite heavy. They're put on the top there so that when the husband came home at night, he'd got a nice hot meal. The sink, a large purpose sink, because virtually lots of things had to be done in it. Some of the washing would be done in it, some of the washing up, the preparing of the vegetable. Large fish would be put inside and cleaned, ready for the evening meal. It was made of a crock, quite sturdy, quite thick, and had to last for a good many years. It wasn't one that was discarded after a few years because it had gone discoloured. It was something that was on probably for the length of the house. No modern washing machines in those days. The washing was done in a tub like this, using a dolly. And that was clothes put in, and it was used like that until the clothes were clean. This is the old rubbing board. Clothes were put on there and rubbed with a scrubbing brush.
We leave Vi in the kitchen and look into the workshop where we find Mick Bradley lighting his fire ready to start work. Every chain maker has his own way of doing this, and here we see Mick's tried and trusted method. When the fire is burning well, the next thing he does is to set up the block ready for the particular size of link that has to be produced that day. The early visitor will have the pleasure not only of watching him do this, but also hear him explaining how and why it's done.
All right, Mick, yes. How's it going? Okay?
Not too bad, mate.
Jolly good. How long have you been making chain now, Mick, you think?
34 officially.
34 officially? Yeah.
44 unofficial. I started straight from school at 15.
Yeah, so when you left from school, you were almost a skilled chain maker, weren't you? When you
straight
think
from
about
school, I finished on the Friday, started work on the Monday.
And this is working with your dad?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
You
Right,
start off with your straight bar.
That's right. There's a straight bar, partially heated, that's right.
The side,
That's right.
and then you bend it into the U shape.
That's right. Heat the
Which
ends.
goes back into the end.
That's right.
Into there, and then you
Scarf it.
pinch the ends down each side, then that.
That's the scarf it, yeah.
Wrap it over your beacon.
Yeah. Join it up into your last
Join
link.
it into the chain. Wrap
Last
it
link
there,
first, that's it.
Back into the fire.
Yeah.
And then your same process keep on going.
That's right, yes, and then you shut it,
And then
weld
roll
it,
it and
then tommy it up and finish
tommy
it
it
up.
and
That's
finish
right,
it
yeah.
all off.
That's great, yeah, that's smashing.
Which is how you...
That's it.
And that
yeah.
can keep going along
Keep
like
on
that. Like
link
making-
by link, that's it.
Yeah,
that's
knitting
right.
it.
That's it, knitting it together.
The heat of the fire required for this process varies from about 800 degrees centigrade for most of the work up to 1400 degrees for the fire welding, which finishes the join. The prime metal used by chain makers was wrought iron. This is pig iron that has been puddled to remove almost all of the carbon, phosphorus, sulfur, manganese and silicon. All these tend to make the iron brittle. Wrought iron has the following valuable qualities. It is easily worked without cracking or breaking, maintains its shape when formed, and can readily be fire welded. It can withstand shock loads and has very good anti-corrosive properties. Unfortunately, it ceased to be produced in 1976 due to the combination of expense and being labour intensive, and the method of manufacture was deemed to be too dangerous in modern times.
I consider myself very fortunate that I'm able to call upon a diminishing band of skilled chain makers who are willing to give up their Sunday afternoons throughout the year in order to show their skills of making chain by hand to members of the visiting public and school parties. Some of them have made chain for over 50 years. Originally, I could call upon 5 chain makers to staff a rota throughout the season. 2 of them, who were a joy to watch, Dennis Barnsley and Len Tibbets, are unfortunately no longer with us. Roy Goff has moved out of the area and Mick Bradley continues to entertain us. We have on duty this afternoon Clary Johnson. He has spent his life in the chain trade. He was responsible for helping to set up the tools in this chain shop way back in 1977 and was the first to make a link of chain in the restored chain shop when it reopened.
I left school when I was 14 and I found myself a job with Ashley Pegg down at Cradley Chain and Manufacturing down Mill Street, Cradley. I worked there till I was 23, I think, and then 24, I think, and I left in 1954 because they were turning over to foundry work. And then I went to work for Jones and Lloyd's. I worked there for, I think it was 18 years. From then I went to work for Noah Bloomers in Quarry Bank. And I worked for them for about another 17 or 18 years. And eventually, through the advent of Japanese cheaper chains and steel chain coming in, the wrought iron chain industry was almost extinct then. I went to work for Basil Hingley in Cradley Heath. That was the only place I could get a job as a chain maker. And I worked there until I retired when I was 65. So this is the bicker which the chain maker works on, and depending on what size he's working, he gets the appropriate bick iron. And usually a chain maker, years and years ago, when there was such a lot of work to be done on by the chain makers, he only concentrated on one or perhaps two sizes, so that if a chain maker was making 5/8, he might be on, say, 5/8 for his lifetime, you see, and he'd be classed as a 5/8 chain maker. And this is a 5/8 bick iron which the chain maker would use. It fits it into his block, and then with a series of wedges and his wedge, he fixes that so that the bick iron is tight in his block, so that he can work on it without it coming loose.
Clary's method of firelighting shows the technique of paper, wood and electric blower combined to produce the desired result. When the paper and wood are well alight, he can scrape the breeze, which is small washed coke, carefully over the flames. The size of the breeze is determined by the size of the chain being made, and this size also determines the size of the hole in the toyer, which is connected to the blower. All these sizes should be the same diameter.
Tommy head, and that's used to remove the hammer marks from the chain after I've hammer welded it, you see. Again, that we have different sizes for each die for each size, you see. All the places where I work, like Cradley Chain, Jones and Lloyd's, Noah Bloomers, they always got a link cutter, a man who was specially employed to cut the links to one specific length for each chain maker on the yard. And these were carried to the chain maker in a wheelbarrow and tipped by the chain maker, and the chain maker just picked them up and put them on his block and started to work.
No matter how small or how large the chain being made, the maximum working temperature achieved is always the same. The chain maker uses the skill of his eyes, looking at the colour of the metal to determine whether the correct working temperature has been attained. The process of making a link of chain involves obtaining the correct length and diameter of bar and putting this through 8 different stages to produce a finished link. First stage is to put the bar in the fire to heat the centre part only. Then take it out of the fire and bend it in either the bender or the hole in the anvil. Then hammer to close into a U shape. Put it back in the fire to heat the ends only. Take it out of the fire and thread it through the last link made. Then, using the flat of the anvil and the wedge-shaped end of the hammer, prepare the ends for a scarf joint. The link has to be turned over to taper each end on opposite sides. Using the bick iron, turn the end in with the hand hammer to form the other end of the link.
With that, I've just scarfed it, what we call scarfed it and wrapped it over. I'll forge the link now. That has to go back into the fire so that I can get a nice welding heat on it and fuse the two parts of the metal together.
When the welding heat of 1400 degrees centigrade is achieved, place it on the block and give 3 blows on each side of the join to fire weld or shut the link. All that now remains is a few blows from the Tommy hammer, which has been fitted with a top die of the correct radius to neatly finish the join and remove all marks.
Just a piece of canvas, you know, which will give protection to our clothes. It's the same as a shirt, you know. We always work to the ganzi, a ganzi, and normally the chainmaker had a piece of what we call ducking sewed onto the front of the ganzi, so it's protected from the flashes, and it made the ganzi last a little bit longer rather than being shot with sparks and being burnt away, you see. And normally the ducking would be taken off and then replaced, you see, so that made the shirt last a little bit longer. There was no special working equipment, no shoes, no goggles, no earplugs, no nothing in those days. I suppose when we worked in the chain shop, which was similar to the one in here, if a factory inspector went into the yards as I worked on, he condemned the place right away.
Mushroom Green Chain Shop has seen over 100 years of chain making in this area and has been geographically right in the centre of all the ups and downs of that period. Events such as the women chainmakers' strike of 1910 and the First World War, when production could not keep up with demand. Hidden behind the walls of chain shops such as this is a past which is stained with sweat, hardship and long hours spent toiling at the hearth and anvil. But what emerges is the pride that chainmakers had in their industry. Apart from the electric blower, which did not appear until the beginning of the Second World War, everything else was done manually. No matter how large or heavy the task, hot metal had to be worked by the sweat and toil of the chain makers. The history of events concerning chain making, as well as the production process, is, however, a complete story on its own.
Anything above 2 inches, they weld on the side. When you see making chain today, is welding on the end. Yeah. And you weld on the end up to, like on a Tommy, up to 1 inch, then you use a dolly up there, again still on the end, yeah, up to about just under 2 inches, inch and 15, 16. But over 2 inches, then the metal is cut off at an angle, and then it's bent round, obviously to come together, when you bend that completely round. Yeah. And then you have to, usually 2 welds, don't you, make, using this stake. If you're going to run an anchor, just drop an anchor by gravity out of the horse hole of a ship. If there's a knot in it and it hits the side, it's got to take the side of the ship out in a cloud of rust, as you can imagine. So Thomas Brunton in 1813 invented the stud, which is held in on the the diameter of the on the inside. Is held in. He's put in the last time under heat. He's closing on the top. To prevent it overtaking, prevent it from getting in a mess. It's not for strength or anything like that, it's just anything for anchoring chain. You've got to study, and if you see it any other use, it's its second use normally. One of the things when you're making large chain, one of the expensive parts is heating the metal. So one of the sayings, strike while the iron's hot. You've got to get in your blows as quickly as possible to shut that metal, and so you use a Johnny, a large 2-handled hammer, you see. As you can see there, there's a larger one there, and 2 men would sort of operate that. And this, again, is only, what, 60, 70 pound mick or something like that. They varied in weight, but I've also found a lot of references to what they called a Monday hammer, which was a 3-handled hammer. And also found references, which was 100 weight and a quarter, you know, and so on, 140 pounds, all that lot, you see. And usually 5 men operated that. 3 on the handles, then 2, as Keith Gale, the expert on the iron industry, to give them a heave up at the front, 2 of them to help lift the front up, sort of thing, you know. So 2 of you together can, you know, you can get a good blow on that, and it will set a chain link down or set it down on a stud, you know. And they also use it for when you're doing anchors, making anchors. You want to strike a blow as fast as possible with a lot of weight, then you use a Johnny, a large hammer, you see. Johnny hammer. That's right, yeah. That was the name of Johnny. It was given the name Monday hammer, by the way, I was told, because nobody likes Mondays either. If you're making chain over a ½ inch, under a ½ inch, you make it from the bar. You can make it from the bar, 3/8 or something like that. You heat your bar off, chop a piece off on the chisel in there. But if you're making over a ½ inch, this is 5/8, it's actually cut the length for you. And then according to if you're doing short link or a bit larger link or cable link, your length of your metal varies. You can see that this one has got a metal spring at the back. Yeah. And the idea is to take that hammer out of the way when the chain maker's working on the block. So when he puts his foot on the treadle, it's treadle operated as well. When he puts his foot down, it actually works with the other tool in the beacon. This is the top tool, the die. This is the beacon down below, which can be changed. You know, we've got various beacons around, haven't we? Yeah. They can be changed to suit whatever diameter you're working on. Tommy stumps, which are buried into the ground, again the same depth as this, again usually. Yeah. Tied up nicely to a box which is full of breeze and cinder and various things. We have rubbish. Every now and again we pack it up, you know, because it settles down through the year. There's your chisel for cutting off your metal to the gauge there, which is set, whichever what size you want to set. You see there, heat it up, cut it off, and work from the bar if you're working from the bar. You see. Right. Well, I say there's a metal spring on that, which I can actually show you one. There's a couple of metal springs there. They replace the ash pole, which we shall see on the next Oliver, and more or less just take the head out of the way so that the chain maker can work on his block without that being in his way, you see. That's more or less the idea of taking that out of the way. And of course, when the chain maker goes, you can see how awkward this treadle is. If Mick goes to walk out of there now and trips over, he's in the soup. So you find a lot of chain makers, when they're finished, they just take that off at night and leave it there. And this again leads to, we think, another saying in the chain industry, you know, a general chain in the black saying in the Black Country. The gaffer looks in through the door. If you've got a line of Tommies, he say, "Oh, Tommy Smith is not in this morning. He must be off the hooks because he hasn't connected his hook up. You see, he hasn't connected his hook up to the Tommy. You see, so again, they sometimes when they got the ash pole, they would unhook the ash pole to rest the pole." Yeah. And so on. But of course these metal springs have been known to explode, you know, with metal fatigue, working day after day. Yeah. They'd probably go off 6 months or so, they'd explode sort of thing, whereas the ash pole could last a man from when he started his employment from 14 up to when he was 65 sort of thing. You know. So they're quite a good source. We've got the luxury at the moment as well of a blower motor, which provides a blast for blowing the fire, which if you're using a breeze fire, a coke fire, you need blast to keep it going really. So we've got the luxury of a blower motor. Most chain makers didn't have that. They had to pump by hand with a bellows.
This was the only form of power they could use in these backyard chain shops because there was no electricity. The bellows itself are made in two sections. There's a one at the bottom and there was a top which they call a reservoir. The bottom was used up and down to fill the top part of the bellows, as we say, with the reservoir. So there was a constant blow of air blast into the fire. There's a nozzle that goes into the fire itself. Then that fits up like that. And then, as I say, it's all sealed off so that no air can escape except through the end of the two end, as you might say. That is the chain there, the original chain, because this was on a frame, you see, and that's the air inlet. As the frame was like that, so the bottom held down like that. It pulled the bottom up onto it, you see.
The apprenticeship was somewhere like 3 to 4 years of a lady chainsmith, and at the end of their apprentice, they made this apprentice piece, which is a backband chain. It fitted over the back of a horse to hold the halters on. It's very intricate. It's a double link and it's twisted link, 1/4 inch diameter chain, and a very intricate job and a very delicate job, just like traditionally done by the lady chain makers.
I'm often asked by visitors the reason for this patch of white paint on the wall. The Kendrick's house number 14 was quite narrow, quite close to this chain shop. The gaslight would shine onto the wall, onto this patch, and reflect across the yard to the lighting the way to the toilet.
I'm actually intrigued every time I come by the number of people who actually visit the place, because really this is a bit of history.
It looks really hard work. Very hot work as well, isn't it? Very physical work to what they do nowadays.
I think it's wonderful. I don't think you ought to let it go. I mean, it's a different world.
It's just though you're going into the past. Everything is so old and how it was probably 100 years ago, really. It's just amazing, really, to watch them make the chain, etc. It's a work of art, isn't it, really?
Only 2 of the original 5 chain makers at this chain shop are still making chain. What happens when Clary and Mike hang up their hammers for the last time? Will anybody carry on the tradition, or are we witnessing the last of the great professional chain makers?